My name is Sarah Bennett. I'm 37 years old, and last Christmas my mother looked my 11-year-old daughter straight in the eye and said, "You're not my real granddaughter. Get out." The words froze the air. Sophie's smile collapsed, her red dress trembling in the light. I stood there, hearing decades of quiet cruelty echo through one sentence. That night, something in me cracked. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn her love, but now, I was done trying. They had no idea what that moment would turn me into. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Because this story isn't just about one cruel Christmas, it's about what happens when silence turns into fire, when a mother's pride burns brighter than love, and when a daughter finally decides to fight back. I grew up in a house where love was measured, counted, and compared like trophies on a shelf. My mother, Patricia Bennett, ruled that house with polished heels and perfect lipstick. She believed emotions were weaknesses, and that children were extensions of her reputation. Every photo on the mantel was proof of her control. My brother Michael's graduation, framed in gold. My own tucked behind a vase. I remember the smell of lemon polish and cold roast beef, the clink of fine china echoing through the dining room. "Sit up straight, Sarah," she'd say. "Look at your brother, see how confident he is?" I'd straighten my back, my fork trembling. Michael would smirk, and I'd swallow another bite of silence. One winter when I was 10, I accidentally knocked over her favorite crystal angel while dusting the living room. It shattered across the marble floor like a gunshot. The room went silent. Patricia appeared within seconds, her heels clicking like gunfire. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she hissed. I stammered an apology, my eyes filling with tears. "No excuses." Outside. Now. She made me kneel in the snow for 15 minutes while the wind cut my cheeks raw. I didn't cry aloud. I learned early that crying only made her colder. Dad stood by the window that day, his silhouette blurred behind the curtains. He didn't stop her. He never did. Later, when he handed me a blanket, he whispered, "Just stay quiet. Honey, she means well." But even then, I knew he was lying to himself. As Michael grew older, his light burned brighter and mine, dimmer. He got the applause, the scholarships, the family name. I got the reminders. "Don't embarrass us. Try harder." When he became a lawyer, she said, "Finally, someone respectable in the family." I had already passed the bar exam, but she never mentioned it. By the time I turned 24, I thought leaving Denver would fix everything. I built my own life, married young, and worked long hours at a small law firm. For a while, I believed I had escaped her shadow. Then my marriage collapsed, another disappointment for Patricia to parade around the dinner table. When I told her I was pregnant and alone, she sighed over the phone. "You never learn, do you?" I hung up that night and cried until the streetlights blurred. But when Sophie was born, I swore she would never feel unloved, no matter what it cost me. Those early years were hard court deadlines, unpaid bills, exhaustion so deep I forgot what weekends felt like. But Sophie made everything worth it. She had my father's quiet eyes and my own stubborn smile. Every time she hugged me, I thought, this is the family I choose. I didn't know it back then, but that promise to protect Sophie from the cold I grew up in would become my entire reason for living. And one day, it would be the very thing that brought the past crashing back through my front door. For a long time, my mother existed only through phone calls I never wanted to answer. Her voice always carried that same polished cruelty, sweet on the surface, sharp underneath. "Sarah, have you thought about remarrying?" she'd ask. "Sophie needs a real family." I'd grit my teeth and say I was fine, but she never called to ask if I was happy, only to remind me of what I wasn't. Still, part of me kept hoping she'd soften. I'd watch her number flash on my phone and think, maybe this time will be different. It never was. Each conversation felt like a test I was destined to fail. The first Christmas after my divorce, Sophie and I baked sugar cookies and watched old movies in our small Denver townhouse. Outside, snow fell in thick, quiet layers. Inside, our oven ticked and the smell of vanilla filled the air. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. I remember Sophie looking up at me, her fingers dusted with flour. "Do you think Grandma would like one?" she asked. I lied and said, "Maybe next year." Next year came, and so did the call. Patricia's tone was deceptively warm. Your father and I thought it would be nice to have everyone together for Christmas, she said. Everyone. The word sounded like a trick. When I hesitated, Sophie overheard. Her face lit up, as if someone had just handed her every Christmas she'd ever imagined. I should have said no, but there was something about her joy pure, unscarred that made me want to believe too. I told myself people could change, that maybe my mother, in her own brittle way, was trying to make peace. I didn't know then that peace, in her world, always came at someone else's expense. In the days leading up to the trip, the cracks started showing. Patricia called to ask what Sophie would wear. When I mentioned the red velvet dress Sophie adored, she sighed. 11 is too old for childish things. Emma's already wearing designer shoes. My stomach twisted, but I swallowed it. I'd learned to pick my battles. Then Michael called. His tone was flat, transactional. Mom's trying, Sarah, he said. Don't ruin this with your sensitivity. I wanted to hang up, but his next words froze me. She's still upset you embarrassed the family, raising a child alone. That word embarrassed hung between us like smoke. That night, Caroline texted me out of nowhere. Be careful. She's been saying things. When I asked what she meant, Caroline hesitated, then sent another message. Sarah doesn't know how to raise Sophie. She said that to the cousins last week. I sat there in the dark, staring at the screen. Sophie was at the kitchen table, stringing beads into a bracelet. She wanted to give it to her grandmother. Her small fingers moved so carefully, each bead chosen with love. When she looked up, her eyes were shining. Do you think Grandma will like it? She asked. I forced a smile. She'll love it. In that moment, I understood something my younger self never did. Children don't just inherit our eyes or our smiles. They inherit our wounds if we don't stop them. I promised myself then that Sophie would never kneel in the snow like I did. She would never think cruelty was love. But promises are fragile things. And sometimes, no matter how strong you build the walls, the past finds a way to knock again, dressed in holiday lights, carrying gifts, and smiling as it walks through your door. The drive to Aspen felt longer than it should have. Snow fell in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, coating the road like powdered glass. Sophie sang Christmas songs in the back seat, her voice light and off-key. I tried to match her energy, but a quiet dread pulsed beneath my ribs. Every mile closer to my parents' house felt like a mile closer to a trap I already knew too well. When the Bennett house finally came into view, it looked like something out of a holiday catalog. White lights lining the roof, wreaths on every window, smoke curling from the chimney. Perfect, sterile, expensive. Sophie gasped. It's beautiful, she whispered. To her, it was magic. To me, it was a stage set for pain. Inside, the scent of cinnamon candles and polished silver hit me all at once. Patricia descended the staircase like she was hosting a gala, not welcoming her daughter home. Sarah, she said, offering a cheek, not a hug. Then, to Sophie, she smiled thinly. You've grown. Her voice had the same temperature as the snow outside. The dining room table was already set. Crystal glasses, folded napkins, name cards. Michael's family had places, even one marked guest, but none for Sophie or me. Patricia noticed me looking. We didn't know if you'd make it on time, she said smoothly. You understand how formal dinners work. Her words sliced cleanly, meant to humiliate without ever raising her voice. Sophie didn't notice. She was too busy admiring the tree, whispering about how it looked like something from a movie. I smiled for her sake, even as I felt that old ache crawl back into my chest. That evening, the cracks widened. Patricia complimented Emma's posture, Lucas's manners, and Caroline's taste in home decor. Every word a backhanded comparison aimed straight at me. When Sophie tried to show her the bracelet she'd made, Patricia's smile flickered but never reached her eyes. Oh, how sweet, she murmured, setting it aside as if it might stain her fingers. Dinner was a theater of tension. Michael talked about a big case he'd won, and Patricia beamed at him. When I mentioned one of my clients, an insurance fraud appeal I'd overturned, she interrupted with a sip of wine. Sarah, dear, do you ever think about a more stable career? Something less confrontational. What? Michael chuckled. Yeah, Mom's right. You've always liked a good fight. Their laughter rang hollow. I pressed my palms together under the table to keep them from shaking. Across from me, Caroline's eyes flickered up, apologetic but silent. Later that night, I tucked Sophie into the guest room, the one Patricia had once used as storage. "Mom," she whispered, "I think Grandma's just shy." My throat tightened. "Maybe," I said softly. "But remember, we don't have to earn anyone's love, okay?" She nodded, but I could tell she didn't understand. Not yet. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing. A work email urgent. The wildfire insurance case was back on the table. If I didn't handle it now, my client could lose everything. I hesitated. Patricia's house felt like a minefield, but duty was duty. I told Sophie I'd be gone for a few hours. Patricia's response was smooth as glass. "Of course. We'll keep her entertained." I should have known that entertained was just another word for cornered. When I returned 3 hours later, I found Sophie upstairs, curled on the bed, her red dress wrinkled and her face streaked with tears. She clutched her bracelet like a lifeline. "Grandma said I'm not her granddaughter," she whispered. "She said I don't belong here." The words hit like a physical blow. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then something inside me snapped, not loudly, but with the quiet precision of a breaking bone. I wrapped my arms around her, promising myself that this time, I wouldn't stay silent. For a long moment, I just held her, feeling her small shoulders shake against me. The air in that house felt poisonous, heavy with perfume and shame. When I finally looked into Sophie's eyes, those wide, wounded eyes, I saw my own 10-year-old self staring back. The same confusion, the same heartbreak. I wasn't going to let history repeat itself. "Pack your things," I whispered. "We're leaving." But before I could stand, the doorknob turned. Patricia stood there, perfectly composed, a glass of wine in hand. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said evenly. Her calmness was worse than yelling. I faced her, my voice low. "You told my daughter she's not your granddaughter." She took a slow sip. "Children exaggerate." Sophie's breath hitched. "You said it," she whispered. Patricia smiled thin, icy. "And maybe I did. Love is earned, not handed out like candy." She looked at me. "Not her. Something you never learned." That was it. The last crack in the dam. I pulled out my phone and hit record. "Say that again," I said quietly. Patricia's eyes narrowed, realizing too late what I was doing. "You wouldn't dare." "Watch me." The silence between us vibrated. She turned and left without another word. But the damage was done. I had proof of every hidden cruelty she'd masked behind pearls and charity galas. Downstairs, the rest of the family sat around the table, laughing as if nothing had happened. When Sophie and I walked in, forks froze midair. Michael frowned. "What's going on?" "She's leaving," Patricia announced sharply before I could answer. "Apparently she doesn't appreciate being here." "Mom," Michael began, but she raised a hand. "Enough. This dinner is for family." Something inside me twisted so hard I almost laughed. "Family?" I said, my voice steady but shaking from the inside. "Then where were our names on the table, Mom?" Her jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic." Caroline's fork slipped from her hand, clattering onto her plate. The sound cut through the room like a blade. Emma and Lucas stared, wide-eyed. Thomas, my father, sat motionless at the head of the table, his eyes glued to his plate, hands trembling just slightly. "You think silence makes you innocent?" I said to him, and his shoulders flinched. Patricia glared at me. "You've embarrassed us enough." I didn't respond. Instead, I pressed play on my phone. The room filled with the small, shaking voice of an 11-year-old. Grandma said, "I'm not her granddaughter." The sound echoed through the crystal glasses, through the perfect tablecloth, through decades of denial. No one spoke. Caroline's eyes welled with tears. Michael's face drained of color. Patricia didn't move, only muttered, "You don't understand. I did what was best for this family." Then Michael cracked. "Best for who, Mom? You made me sign those papers. You made me cut Sarah out of the will." Her eyes shot daggers. "You don't know what you're saying." "Oh, I do," he said, voice shaking. "You've been controlling us for years, and we let you." Thomas finally rose from his chair. For once, his voice wasn't soft, it was raw. "Patricia," he said, tears sliding down his weathered face. "You've gone too far." The words hung in the air, fragile and final. Patricia's composure shattered for the first time in my life. "If you walk out that door," she spat, "you're no longer my daughter." I looked at Sophie, standing beside me, clutching my hand with trembling fingers. Then I guess I'm finally free, I said. We turned, walking past the glittering tree, the plates of untouched food, the ghosts of every Christmas we'd ever ruined. The door closed behind us with a sound that felt like a full stop, the end of something that had been breaking for decades. Outside, snow fell in slow motion, catching the glow from the windows. Sophie looked up at me through tears. Are we really leaving? Yes, I said, my voice steady for the first time all night. And we're never coming back. As we walked toward the car, the cold bit into my skin, but it didn't feel like punishment this time. It felt like freedom, sharp, clean, and earned. The drive back to Denver was silent, except for the crunch of snow under the tires. Sophie fell asleep halfway, her head resting against the window, her bracelet still clutched in her hand. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was the hollow echo of years collapsing. The house lights faded in the rearview mirror, but the words still burned. You're not my real granddaughter. By the time we got home, the storm had thickened into a white wall outside. I tucked Sophie into bed, her cheeks streaked with dried tears, and sat alone in the kitchen. The quiet felt heavy, too heavy. I reached into my coat pocket for my phone and saw the recording. Then I saw something else, a plain white envelope. I'd forgotten about it. Caroline had slipped it into my hand under the table, her fingers trembling. Inside were photocopied documents, the Bennett estate will, signatures in familiar ink, Patricia's handwriting. But one line stood out: Michael Bennett, primary heir. My name, crossed out. Next to it, a notarized amendment signed by Michael, dated the same day my mother invited me to Christmas. My breath caught. I wasn't imagining it. She'd planned this. The dinner wasn't reconciliation, it was distraction. A way to make sure I stayed quiet while she erased me for good. I stared at the papers, anger rising like heat under my skin. I could almost hear her voice in my head, calm, smug, explaining how it was for the good of the family. I'd spent my life folding under that tone. Not anymore. The next morning, I called Caroline. Her voice was hushed, nervous. You got it? Yes, I said. Thank you. I can't talk long, she whispered. Patricia suspects I told you something. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the dial tone humming like static. Then I opened my laptop. For hours, I combed through legal databases, case precedents, inheritance fraud statutes, things I'd taught others to fight but never thought I'd use on my own family. Each click steadied me. The fear began to drain, replaced by precision. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice. And I knew the law better than she ever could. That night, I wrote an email. Not to a lawyer, not to the police, but to the Aspen Philanthropic Council, where Patricia had reigned for decades, preaching family values and moral excellence. I attached 2 files, the recording of Sophie's trembling voice and the altered estate documents. I didn't write a single word in the message body. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. I hovered over send for a long time. Then I thought of Sophie's voice, small but unbreakable. I thought Christmas was about love, not shame. I clicked send. 3 days later, the headlines hit. Aspen socialite, Patricia Bennett under investigation for fraud and family abuse allegations. The story spread faster than wildfire. Her picture appeared everywhere, her perfect pearls, her frozen smile now weaponized against her. Board members distanced themselves. Sponsors withdrew. The woman who once controlled every whisper now drowned in them. Michael called that night. His voice was frantic. Sarah, what did you do? This could ruin us. Us? I said. You mean her. She's our mother. She's your God. I snapped. I stopped worshiping years ago. In the background, I heard Caroline. Her voice, soft but firm. Michael, she's right. Then the line went silent. Later that week, I received a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it until I heard the voice on the other end. My father. Sarah, he said, quiet, fragile. I should have stopped her. I should have protected you. And Sophie. There was a pause, the sound of him swallowing tears. I'm sorry, honey. I won't stay silent again. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The little girl who had once looked for him through the curtain finally heard the words she'd waited decades for. It didn't erase the pain, but it loosened its grip. That night, I stood by Sophie's door, watching her sleep. The glow from the nightlight touched her face, peaceful, safe. Outside, snow kept falling, But this time it didn't feel suffocating. It felt clean. The kind that covers everything ugly and starts it over. I whispered, "It's over." Though part of me knew it wasn't. Some storms don't just end. They shift. They settle into the bones, quiet but never forgotten. The morning after the headlines broke, Denver felt lighter. The snow had begun to melt, revealing wet sidewalks and the first hint of spring. But inside me, something colder remained, a steady calm, sharp and deliberate. Patricia didn't call. She didn't dare. Her name was being whispered through country clubs and charity halls, the same places she once ruled. Every speech she'd ever given about integrity now echoed back like an accusation. I imagined her pacing her glass-walled living room, clutching a tumbler of gin, watching the life she'd built on control crumble in silence. I wasn't done. Not yet. Lily, my oldest friend, stopped by with coffee and a half-smile. "You've seen the press?" she asked. "I have." She sat across from me, sliding her phone forward. On the screen, a draft article. My mother's fraudulent charity records. Ready for publication. "If I post this, there's no coming back for her," Lily warned. I stared at the screen. For years, Patricia had used shame as a weapon. It was only fair the truth did the same. "Do it," I said quietly. "Let people see who she really is." As Lily hit send, I exhaled. Not with satisfaction, but something quieter, release. That evening, my father called again. "Your mother's furious," he said. "But she's finally alone with her choices." His voice trembled. "Are you?" "I've been alone for a long time, Dad," I answered. "Now I'm just not afraid of it." After we hung up, I found Sophie at the kitchen table, threading beads again, bright blues and greens this time. She smiled softly. "This one's for me," she said, "because I know my worth now." Outside, the last of the snow dripped from the roof. Inside, I watched my daughter create something beautiful from broken pieces, proof that some legacies are meant to end, so new ones can begin. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe and share this story. Because sometimes, walking away isn't weakness, it's survival. I spent years trying to earn love that was never meant for me, until I realized peace doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from protecting what truly matters. For me, that's Sophie. For you, maybe it's the part of yourself you've been told to hide. Don't bury it. Don't apologize for it. Stand up. The story isn't over, and neither are you.